Hello, and welcome to this demonstration of IBM Planning Analytics on behalf of ProStrategy. My name is Colm Kennelly. The solution I'm going to demonstrate today is IBM Planning Analytics, which is designed for business planning, budgeting and forecasting, for strategic, financial, as well as operational needs. It is designed to be a single platform for business planners to load and input data, model their business across multiple dimensions, hierarchies, and calculations, and also work with potentially large volumes of data in real time. And it's designed to replace or automate manual and disconnected planning processes, which very often tend to be driven by spreadsheets. The solution is available as a hosted solution on the IBM cloud, and it's also available for companies to install on their own servers. So I'm going to do the demonstration from IBM Planning Analytics Workspace. And this is a browser-based solution that gives me all the access to the data and all the processes that I need to work with. So the first thing I'm going to come to is a dashboard, which is showing our performance by our key operating regions. It's also showing me our performance of our top 5 products, as well as how the different channels that we work in are operating as well. I can filter the view to look at different versions of the data. So if I want to look at actual data as opposed to budget, I can click on that and my view updates in real time. So it is designed to be interactive, allowing me to look at different versions of the data. And this view might be of particular interest to a sales manager or a sales executive. But for a finance executive, I might be more interested in seeing how we're doing in relation to our strategy and the key metrics that define our strategy. So I can see here, for example, that our profitability metric is not doing as well as we would have hoped, and that it's being impacted by our objective to grow our revenue. And this capability to capture and display metrics, this is a key integrated part of the solution. So having a look at how we're doing both from a sales operations perspective and also a strategic perspective, I want to look at some of the planning capabilities available to me. So, in uncertain times, as an organization, we need to be able to change plans, change strategies quickly. So this view here allows me to look at the data at different levels in different ways and slice and dice on that data and make some changes. So here, for example, if I was interested in seeing what our targets were for operating expense, I can select that and I can see that the targets are the same for the prior year actuals as they are for our overall sales figure. Now, in setting targets for next year, one of the things I'd like to see is some sales growth. So at the total level, I'd like to see sales of about 100 million. So there's numerous shortcut commands available to me. I can type in 100M. This translates into a revenue target on a pro rata basis. For example, for Wicklow, that translates to 11.4 million. So as you're starting to see, my workspace allows me to do read-write activities as well as using shortcut commands across potentially very large data sets. I can also set operational targets. So for example, the number of our sales volumes, that's driven by the number of inquiries that we get times a conversion rate. I want to set an operational target based on the fact that I don't expect the number of inquiries to change. So I'm actually going to hold that figure or kind of ring fence that figure. But I'd like to think that we could possibly generate maybe, on a pro rata basis, I'm going to spread a value of 320,000 on a pro rata basis. And really what I'm doing is I'm challenging the business to increase their conversion rates so that we can get a higher number of sales volumes based on the same number of inquiries. So instead of using just financial values, we can model the business based on the key drivers of sales and costs. And this kind of helps us make better decisions about performance and also create more meaningful plans and scenarios. So having set some financial and operational targets, let's look at how our managers can plan to try and meet or exceed those. So if I jump to an area called high participation planning, I can see the workflow status of our current planning process. So I can see that at a total company level, the plan is incomplete. And the reason for that is, as we go down through all the regions, we can see that different submissions are in a different workflow state. And what this means is that we can instantly see where people are in the process, and all the regional managers can see where everyone is in the process. And just having this visibility into who's holding up the process, that can really cut down cycle times by 50% or more. So if I were to look at the East region, I can see the different counties that's made up by, and I can jump straight in and maybe look at one of the submissions. So I'm going to look at the submission for Wicklow. So here I've got a number of useful tabs, useful input screens to allow me to do some data entry. And maybe what I want to do is jump straight into the summary, which is a profit and loss type view. And what this will show me is a summary of my latest planning inputs, as well as my target figures that have been set centrally and operationally for me. So right now my current budget round is falling short of my target figure. So that's something that I want to address. Now, as a manager, if I'm not happy with this submission, I can reject it and possibly send it back to whoever is doing the planning for Wicklow and get them to go in and update the numbers. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to show you briefly how users can plan and use different scenarios to look at how they might meet their targets. So I want to make some changes to the sales volumes figures, and I want that flowing through into the P&L. Before I make any changes, what I'd like to do is create what I call a personal scenario. So I'm going to create a personal scenario, or a sandbox as the software calls it, and I'm going to call that optimistic. So I've now effectively got two copies of my budget data, which to begin with are both identical. But I want to make some changes in the optimistic scenario or version and see what that does to my overall plan. So I'd like to think that we can possibly sell more of some of these products. So this is a company that makes and sells digital consumer goods. I'd like to think that maybe we can sell some more units of our phones. And I think overall, I would like to think that we could sell maybe 12,000 units of phones in the retail channel. And again, it's split the data on a pro rata basis, and then it's show me where there's an impact up at the product total level. And if I want to, I can see what that's doing to our gross revenue number. So that brings it up quite nicely for the retail channel and also for the overall channel total. And then of course, if I'm interested in seeing what that does in relation to my target, I can see that the budget is still slightly below the target number. Whereas if I go back to the default scenario, which is still kept, obviously that is much lower. So the optimistic one is looking a bit better, but it's not quite there in terms of what we need to do. So the last thing I'm going to do is possibly looking at maybe increasing sales of our desktop products by 10%. And again, another shortcut command, Inc10, which it doesn't allow me to spread back in the revenue because we've restricted that. But if I increase the units by 10% and then jump back into my P&L, I can see if I'm getting closer to the number, and indeed I am. Okay. So what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm just going to make that 2,000 just so we know that it'll take us over the threshold for the target figure, and that's fine. So I can create as many of these scenarios and sandboxes as are appropriate to me, and I can keep as many and I can delete them as often as and when I need to. But if I am happy with a particular scenario, then I can commit to those figures. And these now become the base figures, and these are the ones that will get aggregated up and rolled up through the hierarchy and visible by other users. The final thing I'm going to do is to resubmit this plan so that we know that it's finished and that the workflow state goes back into a status of locked. Okay, so we've briefly seen how the solution supports high participation planning with workflow management capabilities, and also the ability for users to run their own personal scenarios on the data before committing that in a workflow managed environment. Okay, so having done an iteration of the budget, the next thing that we might want to do is possibly create a second iteration or a second version of the budget. And that's something that the software makes very easy and flexible to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new version, and I'm just going to call it V2, and hit the add version button. And what that will do is create a new placeholder in the data, in the model, for my data. At the moment, that version is completely blank. We haven't got any numbers in there. But as a starting point for that version, I would like to copy some data from a previous version, and I'm going to copy the data from the budget data that we were just working on. So I hit copy version, click on continue, and this will take a few seconds. But if you think about what it's doing, it's quite substantial. It's copying the data, all of our sales data, volumes, prices, costs of sales across all of our products, channels, time periods, and entities. It's copying all of our payroll data by employee, by cost center, by period, etc., as well as any other supporting data such as overhead information, balance sheet information, drivers and assumptions, whatever data we've got in the model. And as you can see, it's finished that for me, and I've now got a new version that we can work with. It's also updated all the input templates that my users are working with, so they will be working with the latest data straight away. The other thing that it allows me to do is to make changes to our key business hierarchies. So in this scenario, I want to model the impact of launching a new product. So what I'm doing here is I'm effectively updating one of the key structures in our business. So I'm going to launch a new 4 GB 64 gig model, which is going to roll up into the 4G smartphones group. So again, the first step is to just add that into our hierarchy, which it's done. And then the second step is I'm going to copy some data for what I think might be a similar product in terms of a sales profile. So I'm going to use the 4 GB 16 gig model as a starting point, hit the run button, and that's going to go away and copy all of the data for that particular product. And that's now finished. And if I want to visualize how that might look, then I can jump to the scenarios tab that I've got over here. And I've got two views of the data. I've got one which is looking at the sales volumes, and another which is looking at the gross revenue which is driven off that. And if I want to, I can jump in here. I can change the version so that I'm looking at V2. And as you would expect, the numbers are the same across the versions. And also what you will spot if I expand out my product hierarchy and look at the 4G smartphones, I can see that I've got my new product which has been added into the hierarchy with the data for similar data for the 16 GB product. So within here, as a high-level user, I want to create scenarios across the entire organization, not just for one entity. So again, within here, if I bring up my little toolbar on top, it gives me the ability to create additional personal scenarios. And I'm going to model the impact of the new launch. And again, I want to look at this really from the total year perspective. And I think that we could probably look to, excuse me, maybe add another 5,000 units to this particular product. And again, I'll see the impact both in terms of the volumes, and then I immediately see the impact in terms of my revenue over on the right-hand side, because these two views are synchronized with each other. Okay, so we've seen a few examples of how we can interact with the data, how we can set financial targets, how we can set operational targets. We've seen how we support high participation planning and data entry. We've seen how it's easy to create new versions of the data and update key hierarchies and business structures in real time. And then we've seen how we can create very high-level scenarios all within the same workspace. So the last thing that I want to show you is how would a user assemble some of this content? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the last tab, which is self-assemble. I'm going to turn that into edit mode. And I could go and look for the data over on the left-hand side, and there's quite a bit of data stored away in this model. But really, I may not know the data set particularly well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, can you give me actual gross revenue by product? So I type in the question just using the English language names of the items, and it's saying that my actual gross revenue with a product total is 76.8 million. So that's a really good starting point for the analysis that I was going to do. So I'm going to use this in my workspace. Now I know from the data that we break this down by further analysis, such as the organizational aspect, channel, etc. So by clicking on this little ellipsis here, I can add those into my analysis, and I can change it to look at, let's say, any of the regions, or I can look at the total company, and I can change the view to look at 2017. And that figure, the product total, because it's got a plus sign beside it, I know that it has a hierarchy and it's made up from a lower level. But maybe I want to see this data over time, so I can drag my months dimension into the rows, and it shows me the full-time hierarchy of months to quarters to the full year. Really, all I want to see are the individual months, and we've already got a subset defined that just shows us the months. And maybe I want to see how the products are made up by month, by product. So I'm starting to customize the view. I'm starting to be able to do that very simply just by dragging and dropping some of the data items. I don't need to be an administrator to do this. I'm just a casual user. Because I'm looking at data over time, a nice way to look at it might be to look at a line graph, for example. And you'll see here as well that if I want to, I don't just have to be looking at the numbers. I can drill down on graphical views to see how the different product categories are doing. And I can see the figures coming through for our new product. I can undo to take it back to the higher level that we were looking at. I can resize it if I want to start adding more things onto this canvas, moving it around. I can change the size of it. There might be other views. I might want to turn this into a dashboard style view, and I could do that. Again, I know that I should have a view called revenue analysis by quarter. I know I've got a view called that, but I don't know where it is in the data model. Type in the question, it returns the view for me straight away. And maybe, like I say, I want to have this as a more dashboard style view. So maybe I'll show this data as a column chart, tidy it up by removing the headings, make it a little bit smaller, move it to the right of this particular view, and again reduce the heading, get rid of the headings from here. The very last thing I want to do on here is to be able to filter this by the regional aspects of our hierarchy. I can do that in a couple of ways. I've already bookmarked our list of regions, and by choosing that, it jumps me straight to where the regions are. And then I want to add this as a selector widget, so that when I choose a region over here, I want the views that I've added in to filter based on that. So to make them dynamic, I just highlight the view, go to the properties, choose synchronize, and I just want to synchronize on the organizational dimension. And I'll just repeat that for the column chart. Okay, so that looks quite good. I'm going to save my work, switch out of edit mode. And in the space of about 5 minutes, I've been able to start with a blank page, type in a question that I wanted an answer to, customize the view as a non-administrator user, and then turn it into an interactive dashboard style view of my underlying data. That concludes the demonstration. Just to recap, you've been watching IBM Planning Analytics, which is a business planning solution for planning, budgeting, and forecasting, a single platform for all your planning needs, replacing and automating spreadsheet-based processes. Thank you for watching.